Okay. Good morning, everybody. Before we begin, I'd like to formally welcome back Janusz in person, a active participant from Poland and Israel. He's now with us in person. Good to see you here. Over the years, people have come to the understanding that by studying organs of the human body after a person has died, we can learn a great deal about human anatomy. We can learn about how to prevent certain diseases that a person may have. And the question is whether you can allow your body to be used for medical research. It's not a question of donating organs, which is a related topic, but it deals with autopsies. It deals with donating your body to science. You can have, when you renew your driver's license, you could put you could check off a box saying that I donate my body to science. The question, as we've said many times before, when you're dealing with the area of Jewish ethics, you have a collision of two values. On the one hand, you have the notion of Tselem Elokim, God's image in man. You have the notion of Kavod HaMes, how you treat a corpse that once had life. There are many, the Nivel HaMes, you can't desecrate the body in any way. So you have the collision of these two values. The other value, of course, is the preservation of life. It's a major value in Judaism. How can we justify these two conflicting notions? On the one hand, we want to save lives. That's the preservation of life is an important Jewish value. On the other hand, we don't want to desecrate the human body, the vessel that holds the divine, so to speak. How do you deal with these two conflicts? And we value both of these things. We know it wasn't until the 17th or 18th century when dissections were utilized as part of medical training officially, even though throughout history, people did examine and dissect bodies. We have it in the Talmud, where several places in the Gemara talks about examining the bodies of people who were executed. And they would do dissections. Throughout the Middle Ages, of course, you had the famous stories about grave robbers. They would take bodies of recently deceased people and steal the bodies, actually, and bring them to some mad scientist or doctor who wanted to really learn about the body. And how do you learn about the body? By opening it up and studying it. So this conflict of values played out in Israel in a very dramatic way, because in Israel, they opened the Hebrew University and they opened the medical school. But it took 22 years until anatomical dissection was allowed, because the rabbis were arguing about it. At Hadassah Hospital, or Hebrew University at that time, was, I would guess, very respectful of rabbinic opinion, and they didn't allow dissection as part of medical training until 20 years after they opened up. It was a big debate, and we'll talk a little bit about that, who the rabbis were. But in theory, the primary value is to save human life. That should trump everything else. The key tshuva on this question was written by the Noda B'Yehuda. And we're talking in the 17th century. And he wrote a tshuva concerning autopsies. And normally autopsies are prohibited. Question of nivel hames, you can. And by the way, just as a side point, when we get to our conclusion at the end, whenever an organ is removed from a body, it requires burial. If you have a tonsillectomy or an appendectomy, which is common, those things should not be taken to the hospital incinerator, which all organs are. They're incinerated. But anything taken from the human body requires burial. That's why there's an organization in Israel called Zaka. You might be familiar with them. And they have this horrible task. Whenever there is a killing or an accident or a shooting or some type of a tragedy where there are human body parts all over the place, these guys go and they scrape and they collect every possible tissue, organ, whatever's left over from a body for proper burial. This was done by a number of people following the bombing in downtown in New York when the World Trade Center was attacked. You had people scouring rooftops all over the place to find tissue, to find bone fragments, to find pieces of bodies, because not only for burial, but also to identify people that a husband may have died so a woman can get remarried. I know Rabbi Weissman at the RCA was involved in some of these things, and many other rabbanim in different organizations. So the Zaka organization, it's gruesome work, but and there's a unit in the Israeli army that does the same thing. Unfortunately, it's necessary. But getting back to autopsies, yeah.
If somebody has an arm or a leg amputated.
Yes, it requires burial.
Right, but should they get a grave and then add the rest of the body when the time comes?
That could be, yes. That's one way of doing it. Get a grave, but yeah, that could be done.
No, is that necessary?
It's preferable for the limbs to be buried with the body, if possible, but not necessary. I mean, because it's the same question. Can I donate an organ to somebody else post-mortem? If I die, can I donate my corneas? Can I donate any internal organs to somebody that could help them? The question is, what happens when Tchias HaMesim comes by? Will my organs somehow be replenished? Will my amputated leg somehow grow back? These are interesting theological questions, not for now. And that's why some people are concerned about donating organs. But clearly, it's not an issue. But coming back to the autopsy issue of the Nod of Yehuda, Yecheskel Landau. So again, Judaism is generally opposed, normally, to autopsies. Question of nivel hames, you don't want to desecrate the body. Now, you have a problem. Sometimes the state requires an autopsy. If a person dies in an automobile crash, the state requires an autopsy because what if the guy just had a heart attack right before he lost control of the car? Then the insurance doesn't pay. What if a person died of natural causes before somebody shot him? I mean, now, I remember very, very clearly David Stern, Olav Shalom, member of our congregation, who was in that terrible train crash many, many years ago. And he was killed in the train crash. And he was taken to a hospital somewhere in New Jersey. And they wanted to do an autopsy. And being Orthodox Jew, obviously his family did not want that. And I remember very clearly a whole bunch of people, myself included, in the house. Everybody was calling whoever they knew to make sure an autopsy wouldn't happen. He was in this hospital somewhere in central Jersey and calling legislators. Finally, one of our doctors in our community reached another doctor, woke him out of bed 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, got him to sign a death certificate that the death was caused by internal injuries, and he signed off on, and autopsy was avoided. But it was a very fraught number of hours. Unfortunately, this isn't always the case, and people aren't always able to avoid doing this. But other than that, the autopsies, if an autopsy is performed, all the organs, if they are removed for examination or whatever, have to be put back in the body and be buried. Now, Yechezkel Landau said, like all the rabbis before him, autopsies are forbidden. However, if a person died because of a certain malady, a certain sickness, and there are other people suffering from that same sickness, and by doing the autopsy, you can learn how to save other lives, under those circumstances, it's permissible. Fast forward to the 21st century. If a person dies of a certain sickness, you don't have to know if there's somebody else in the town or the community or the city suffering from that same sickness, because today, with instant communication and computers, and someone in the world has that illness that could be helped by this autopsy. So that kind of makes it a little bit easier under certain circumstances to allow for autopsies. Now, going one step further, what about donating a person's body to science? If I want to donate my body to a medical school for students to study, because by studying anatomy, you learn how to be a better doctor. And now today, by the way, it's interesting. Today, they have these computer models of the human body and the internal organs that are so lifelike and so realistic, you don't have to do a human dissection anymore. And in some medical schools, they actually don't have to. Number one, there aren't that many bodies available. But number two, the computerized versions are much more realistic than the actual human organs in some cases. You have to see it. It's an amazing thing. I remember, however, Rabbi Tendler was also a professor of biology, who would tell the students in the bio class, if you're going to med school and you're studying gross anatomy, make sure your lab partner is a non-Jew and have him make the first incision. That way you avoid the problem of nivel hames on a technical level. But clearly, by studying human anatomy, you're helping other people. And Rav Landau's psak, I guess, is the one that is determinative. Now, once the body is exhausted and you've studied all the internal organs, the circulatory system and the bones and all the various parts of the body, the requirement is you have to put it all back and bury the body properly. Now, the question that makes it difficult is when a person dies, you're supposed to bury them as soon as possible. If you're donating your body to science, that becomes almost impossible, because it takes a while until you deliver to the medical school, the papers are signed, until they finish cutting it up and studying it. So it could be a while until the body is ultimately buried. So that is a concept that has to be dealt with. The easier concept, of course, is utilizing non-Jewish bodies, people who die with no relatives, people derelicts, or people that die on the street, people who have no family. But as I said, the computerized versions of the human body and the anatomy are so lifelike, they almost don't have to do it anymore. But you can still donate your body to science. Again, when you're Jewish, it's problematic in terms of not so much of nivel hames, but a quick burial is a problem. Now, does that override saving a life? Again, here is the juncture. Here is where these two ethical values collide. We want to save lives. We want to dignify the body by giving it a quick burial. How do you justify how do you resolve that conflict of the two values colliding with one another. And that's why you have a local rabbi to ask these questions too. Okay. According to one psak, you can't desecrate a human body, but if there is an immediate life-saving value, as we said, you can, and a person can be mochel, a person can waive some of the other regulations, preserving dignity after death and so forth, and you theoretically, you could forego some of those concerns, but ultimately, according to the Binyan Sion or Vettlinger's Chuvos, as long as all the body parts and the body will ultimately be buried under certain circumstances, you can allow this to take place. Based on these heterim, after 20 years of debate, the Ashkenazi chief rabbi at the time, Yitzchak Halevi Herzog, supported by Rabbi Eliezer Waldenberg, the great posek from Shaarei Tzedek Hospital, wrote like 13 volumes of chuvos on medical issues, and Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, the chief rabbi of Jerusalem at that time. They allowed the Hadassah Medical School and Hebrew University Medical School to perform dissections of the human body. And they also allowed a person to donate his body for medical research. But the donor can make this, the donor is the one that makes this decision, not the family and not the doctors. If a person dies from an unknown malady, an illness that nobody has seen before, then you have to have the rabbis convene to discuss the propriety of doing an autopsy. But if it's a disease that people know about and someone else is suffering from and we haven't found a cure yet, under those circumstances, it might be allowed. And again, the Gemara talks about examining the remains of an executed criminal, and you can find sources. But basically, just to sum it up, autopsies today, if you are forced to do it because the state requires it, and you can't get a doctor to sign off on the cause of death, and there's an illness that somebody was suffering from, then you could allow the autopsies under extreme circumstances, but it's always better to avoid it. There are still some rabbis who are ultimately opposed to it because of kavod hames and the dignity of the human body. But if there are genetic diseases, for example, or violent crimes, again, whenever this question comes up, a posek should be consulted in each case. But again, this is just one example of so many that we've discussed over our classes. When resolving ethical issues in halacha is always challenging because you have competing values. How do you determine which value is supreme? Preserving life, preserving human dignity. Those are two competing values in halacha and in hashkafa, Jewish conceptualizations of sanctification. How do you resolve these two things? And the conflict, again, requires a tremendous amount of rabbinic ingenuity, shall we say, to resolve these in a halachic way. Yes. Okay, so ultimately, preserving life could be said to be a higher priority than preserving human dignity, presuming that saving the life of another person is in the picture. So it depends on the nature of the death. A person dies of natural causes, then there's nothing to talk about. But if a person dies of a genetic disease, now there may not be somebody in your town suffering from the same disease, but there should be somebody on the other side of the world. And given the facility of communications today and sending pictures and sending results of autopsies and studying of the organs, you can do it in an instant over the computer. That would follow Doda Yehuda's psak, that if your research can help save another person's life, And it doesn't have to be in your local town. It could be somewhere around the other side of the world. But if it could help, that would be a heter. Yeah.
What about removing a bullet
Removing a bullet.
for evidence?
Okay.
Or a pacemaker to see if the pacemaker failed.
That a bullet or a pacemaker is not an organ.
But you do have to cut open together.
Yes, you have to get to it. But that's just a question of surgery. That's not a question of removing an organ or transferring an organ. Now, that's just simple surgery.
So that's okay.
Yeah, but a better question would be bone fragments. If you have surgery to remove certain bones from your body, that requires burial. Anything taken from the human body requires burial. And sometimes hospitals don't always respect that concept unless they're told in advance. I want anything taken out of the body bagged and tagged, given to the family in a sealed, whatever container, whatever it might be, for proper disposal or burial. Which is why, and this, I'm not going to talk about it in too much detail, but I encourage you, if you don't have a medical directive, aside from having a will, which you should all have, and if you don't have a will, get one, a halachic will. You should get a hold of Dasi Brandstatter before she makes Aliyah, because she specializes in doing these things as an attorney. It's a halachic will. But aside from a halachic will, you also have to have a medical directive. And the best medical directive simply says, when I am not in a position to determine my medical decisions, I appoint so-and-so to make them for me. It's much better than some of those medical directives which say this condition or that condition, because there can be another condition that isn't listed, and the doctors make a decision for you. That's why I like, the RCA has one, the Aguda has one. The Aguda one I think is better because it's much more generic. It simply says, when I can no longer make decisions about my medical care, I appoint so-and-so to make these decisions. And if that person isn't available, then I appoint Rabbi so-and-so to make these decisions. And every time you go into a hospital, give them a copy of that medical directive. Advanced directive, living will, whatever you want to call it. You must have that. Because hospitals, unfortunately, will do what they want to do. Unless they have in their hand a medical directive telling them otherwise. They'll make a decision for you. And sometimes those decisions may not be halachic decisions.
Wally,
Yes.
according to what you said, if someone has had a knee replacement or a hip replacement, that part should be buried?
Yes. Yeah. Speak up, I can't hear you. Okay, again, if there's a legitimate need or a person's life could be helped or saved, absolutely. Yeah.
There are people who bury their nails when they cut them. But I never heard of anyone burying teeth or hair. So what's the distinction?
It's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that. It's a very good question. Why don't we bury hair when we get a haircut? It's an excellent question. I never thought of that. Or when you clip your nails. That's an excellent question. I'd have to look that up. That's a very good question.
You can always send me the hair and I'll put it on top.
Yeah, we can glue it on top. I could use it. I always ask my barber for put some more on top. Yeah, that's an excellent question. Hair or nails? I guess off the top of my head, I would say it's probably not considered part of the body requiring burial. But it's a very good question. I'll find out who discusses it. Excellent, excellent. Yeah.
Not having fall on the floor so you step in.
Well, what some people do is they burn the nails as a way of disposing it. But the better question is, why don't nails require burial? It's, okay, maybe, but I need to find somebody who tells me definitively that that is the case.
Why?
Logically, you're right. Yes, Nathan.
Maybe because it grows back by itself, and it always grows back.
Okay. These are all good possibilities. It grows back by itself. It's not considered part of the body once it's cut off. All I'm interested in doing is finding if anybody in the halakhic literature discusses this. So I have my homework assignment. I'll try to get back to you on that next time we meet. Anything else? Okay, have a great day out there. Stay warm.
Thank you, Wally.
Thank you, Wally.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Wally.
You're very
Welcome back, Giannis.
Welcome back, Jan.
Thank you, Wally. Stay healthy, stay warm.
Okay. All right. Hishem Baruch Me'atov Yad Olam. Rosh Hashanah Shlot V'Chainu. Amen. Amen.
Surah never used the actual bodies. Surah never used actual bodies.
Because you don't have to. These videos are so lifelike. It's unbelievable.
Years and years ago, when they made the medical school, they did not use
Yeah,
actual
for that,
bodies.
for that reason.